Let me tell you a story about a little girl named Nora. Most 6-year-olds ask about toys, cartoons, or maybe what's for dinner. But not Nora. One evening, as the sunset poured golden light through the kitchen window, she looked at her mother and asked a question that stopped the world cold. Why do people vanish? Where do they go when their bodies stop moving? Her mother froze mid-motion, the knife still in her hand, a loaf of bread half sliced. She forced a smile. Sweetheart, that's not something you need to think about yet. You're too young. But Nora shook her head. I already think about it. She wasn't being defiant, just honest, because her nights weren't filled with normal childhood dreams. They were heavy with visions she couldn't explain. Stretches of endless desert sand. Boats gliding silently across a black river beneath a sky drowning in stars. And always, a figure cloaked in green, tall, still, and half-whispering words she couldn't fully hear, words that echoed when she woke. At school, the same thing happened. While her classmates laughed about games, Nora asked her teacher, "Why do people lie if truth is better?" The teacher frowned, chalk in hand, caught off guard. "Because sometimes it's easier." But Nora whispered, "Maat says truth is balance." She didn't even know how she knew that name. Maat, it had only come to her in a dream, alongside the image of a feather weighed against a heart. Her classmates laughed. The teacher turned quickly back to arithmetic, eager to bury the moment. Nora wasn't trying to be strange. She was only speaking the language her soul already knew. That evening, when her father came home, she asked him too, "Do you ever feel like people are pretending? Like everyone is wearing masks?" Her father smiled, tired from work. "That's just how the world is, Nora. Best not to think about it." But Nora couldn't stop. That night, she dreamed again of the Black River. The cloaked figure didn't speak. He only lifted a hand, blessing the questions no one else wanted to hear. And in that silence, a promise was born. This was only the beginning. By the time Nora turned 8, she carried her questions the way other kids carried toys. Always with her, always turning them over like smooth stones in her pocket. Her classmates giggled about tag and cafeteria crushes, about whose sneakers were coolest or whose dad bought them ice cream. Nora listened, smiling politely. But her thoughts were elsewhere. She wanted to ask, why does laughter sometimes sound empty? But she had tried that once, and the boy next to her wrinkled his nose and muttered, "You're weird." That word clung to her. Weird had followed her like a shadow. She heard it again at her aunt's house when she refused to play dolls, and instead sat by the window watching the rain streak the glass. "Strange little thing," her aunt whispered, thinking Nora couldn't hear. But Nora wasn't trying to be strange. She just noticed. She noticed that her uncle's smile never touched his eyes when he said he was fine. She noticed how her cousin boasted loudly at the dinner table, but his hands trembled when nobody looked. She felt those cracks inside herself like ripples in a hidden river. One afternoon, the family gathered in the courtyard. The air smelled of stew and warm bread. Nora, sitting quietly, finally spoke aloud what she saw. "Uncle," she said softly, "you say you're happy, but I think you're sad." The whole courtyard froze. Her uncle's face tightened. Her mother's hand gripped her shoulder like a warning. "Nora," she hissed, "don't say such things." "But it's true," Nora whispered. "I can feel it." A silence stretched, thick, uncomfortable, until her uncle forced a laugh. "Children have wild imaginations," he said. The adults nodded quickly, grateful for the excuse, but Nora felt the weight of her mother's eyes on her. "Don't do this again." That night, ashamed yet confused, Nora lay staring at the ceiling. Why is truth unwelcome? Why do people hide behind masks that don't fit? And then the dream came again. The Black River, the cloaked figure in green. His voice, soft and low, like reeds bending in the wind. "Do not be ashamed, child of sight. The world fears mirrors." Nora woke with tears on her cheeks. Not of sadness, of recognition. Somewhere beyond the silence of adults and the laughter of children, someone understood. And the river was waiting. At school, Nora's curiosity only sharpened. Most of her classmates were praised for memorizing multiplication tables or spitting back facts from the history book. But Nora's questions always cut sideways, striking where no one wanted them. One morning, the teacher's voice rang with pride as she described the reign of a great conqueror, a man who, she said, brought peace through victory. Nora's brow furrowed. She raised her hand slowly. "But If he killed people to win, how is that peace? The class erupted into giggles. The teacher's smile faltered, her chalk pausing mid-stroke. That's not the point of the lesson, Nora, just copy the notes. But Nora couldn't let it go. What good was history if you couldn't ask what it meant? Later that same day, in science class, the subject shifted to stars. The teacher explained they were burning gases far away in the night sky. Nora's hand lifted again. Do they watch us the way we watch them? The teacher chuckled awkwardly. Nora, stars don't watch. They're just fire in the sky. This time the laughter from her classmates wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was dismissal. The sound of people turning away, deciding she didn't matter. That evening, Nora sat across from her father at the kitchen table. When I ask questions, she said quietly, everyone acts like I'm wrong, but I'm not trying to be bad. I just want to understand. Her father lowered his newspaper with a sigh. Sometimes it's better not to ask. Teachers don't like being challenged. People don't like being reminded of things they can't answer. Nora looked down at her hands. But if no one asks, don't we just repeat the same mistakes? Her father smiled gently, as if she were speaking a language he couldn't quite understand. He kissed her forehead and went back to his paper. That night, Nora returned to the Black River. The cloaked figure was waiting, his voice flowing like the Nile through reeds. You feel the weight of silence, but silence is not emptiness. It is fear, and those who fear resist. She nodded in her dream, though she didn't fully understand, but one truth was clear. The more she saw, the more alone she became. By the time Nora turned 9, her dreams no longer felt like fragments of imagination. They carried a weight, a presence, as though someone or something was reaching through the veil of sleep to meet her. One night, the dream felt sharper than ever. She stood on the edge of a shoreline she had only glimpsed before. The Black River stretched before her, wide and endless, its waters still as glass. The sky above shimmered with stars so bright, so many, they felt close enough to touch. And there he was, the cloaked figure in green. But this time, Nora didn't feel like she was watching a shadow. He was real, solid, luminous, his robe glowing faintly like reeds touched by moonlight. Her small voice carried across the still water. Who are you? The figure raised one hand, palm open. His voice came low and steady. I am called by many names, but here, in your dreams, I am the memory of the Nile. I am the voice of questions that cannot be buried. Nora swallowed hard. Why do I keep coming here? Because you listen, the figure said. Most close their ears. You keep yours open. You are a mirror, little one. You see what others turn away from, and that is why they do not welcome your words. Her chest tightened. But why this river? Why do you show me this place? The figure looked across the water, the starlight glinting on its surface. This is the path all must walk when the body falls. Some call it the duat. Some call it the passage to truth. Here, masks are torn away. Only the heart remains. One day you will understand why you stand here. She wanted to ask more, but his form began to dissolve into the mist. His final whisper echoed as he faded. Remember this, the world fears truth. Yet truth is the only raft that carries one safely across. Nora woke with her heart pounding, awe and sorrow mixing inside her. At breakfast she tried to explain. I saw a river darker than night. A man in green spoke to me. Her mother frowned, spoon clinking against her bowl. Nora, you must stop telling these stories. They'll frighten you. They're not stories, Nora insisted. They feel more real than... Enough, her mother snapped. Dreams are just dreams. Don't make yourself strange with them. Nora lowered her eyes. Once again, her inner world was shut out. Yet deep down, she clung to the figure's words. Truth is the only raft. And she knew, one day, she'd need it to cross. Nora had begun to wonder if maybe children could understand better than adults. Adults dismissed her. They told her to stop talking, stop asking. But children still dreamed. They built kingdoms from blankets and made friends out of shadows. Surely one of them would know what it was like to carry questions bigger than themselves. Her chance came one spring afternoon as she walked home with Marin, a girl from class who often sat beside her. Marin's laughter bubbled out easily, like water spilling over stones. That day the air smelled of dust and orange blossoms, the kind of day where everything felt wide open. Nora listened as Marin chattered about a birthday party, cakes, balloons, silly games, but her thoughts drifted, as always, back to the river, to the cloaked figure who haunted her nights. to the weight of truths no one wanted. Finally, she swallowed and spoke. Marin, do you ever dream of places that feel older than the world? Like they've been waiting for you? Marin blinked, her smile slipping. What do you mean? Nora's voice softened. I dream of a river darker than night. There's a man in green robes. He talks about truth, about hearts being weighed. It feels more real than school, more real than here. A silence stretched. Marin's eyes darted away. She gave a nervous giggle. That's weird, Nora. Really weird. Why would you dream about scary things like that? I dream about candy shops and roller coasters. Nora's chest tightened. But it isn't scary, it's beautiful. It feels like it means something. Marin shifted uncomfortably, then muttered. You always talk like this, like you're some kind of grown-up. Or a ghost. My mom says you read too much, that you make things up. The words stung deeper than Nora expected. She lowered her gaze to the stones beneath her shoes. I'm not making it up. But Marin was already pulling ahead. I'm going to run. See you tomorrow. She didn't wait for a reply. That night, Nora sat at her window, knees hugged to her chest, watching the moon crawl across the sky. Her chest felt hollow, as though something had cracked inside her. She whispered into the night, Why does no one want to hear the truth? And the dream answered. The river stretched before her, endless and black. The cloaked figure's presence pressed against her heart. His voice was steady, unshaken. They fear what you carry, even those your own age. The world rewards masks, not mirrors. But remember this, little one, the river sees without fear, and so must you. Nora woke with damp eyes, clutching her blanket. For the first time she understood her loneliness was no accident. It was a price, and she would keep paying it. After Marin's rejection, Nora learned something new. Silence could be armor. It didn't feel like strength at first. It felt like shrinking. But she noticed how the world seemed calmer when she swallowed her questions. At school, when the teacher praised a conqueror or skipped over uncomfortable truths, Nora no longer raised her hand. Instead, she wrote her doubts in the margins of her notebook. Little secret trails of ink no one else would ever read. When her classmates traded gossip or laughed at jokes she didn't understand, she simply smiled politely and kept her thoughts pressed tightly behind her teeth. And the change was immediate. Her teacher smiled more often. Her mother stopped scolding her for talking strangely. Even her classmates, the ones who used to roll their eyes, began to invite her into games. They whispered secrets in her ear, trusted her with things they'd never have given the girl who asked too many questions. On the surface, life was easier. Nora could pass through days without being called strange. She could walk the halls without hearing laughter sting her back. But inside, something was shifting. Each unspoken question pressed heavier against her chest. Each buried truth made her feel smaller, folded inward, as though her heart was being packed into a box too small for its shape. At night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, whispering the questions no one wanted to hear. Why do people pretend? Why do they punish honesty? Why do I feel like I don't fit anywhere? The only reply was silence, until the dreams came again. The black river shimmered beneath a thin mist. The figure in green stood waiting, closer than ever before, as if he had stepped forward to meet her halfway. His hood tilted when she approached. You are learning the art of masks, he said, voice flowing like water over stone. Nora frowned. I don't want to wear a mask, but when I don't, people don't like me. They get uncomfortable, they leave. The mask keeps them near, he replied. But it buries you. The mirror pushes them away, but it frees you. This is the riddle of living with sight among the blind. Nora lowered her gaze, tears burning at her eyes. Then what should I do? Child, you must walk between. Silence is not surrender. Words are not always weapons. In time, you will learn when to hide and when to reveal. But never mistake quietness for emptiness. Even in silence, your soul speaks. She woke trembling, clutching those words like a secret map. From that day forward, Nora became two people, the quiet child who smiled and blended in, and the restless soul who walked the black river in her dreams. And she knew both halves could not stay hidden forever. By the time Nora turned 10, silence had become her second skin. She had learned how to nod when expected, how to smile when uncertain, how to say just enough, but never too much. It was a balancing act, and for a while it worked. She blended in. She stopped being the weird one, until the day her silence itself became a crime. The classroom was heavy with spring heat. The windows were propped open, but the air barely stirred, and the smell of chalk dust clung like a film to every surface. The teacher paced at the front, chalk snapping against the board as she wrote dates and battles, reciting history as if it were carved in stone. Suddenly, her eyes landed on Nora. "Nora," she said sharply, "what year did the conquest of the western provinces begin?" Nora blinked. She knew the answer. She had memorized it, just like everyone else. But the words stuck in her throat. Her gaze drifted instead to the dust motes floating in the sunlight, tiny sparks that looked like stars. "Well?" The teacher pressed, impatience curling her voice. Nora finally spoke, but not the way she was supposed to. "Why do we only learn the years of wars? Why not the years of peace? Why don't we learn about the people who built homes, or sang songs, or loved each other?" The classroom fell silent. Dozens of eyes turned to her, some wide with curiosity, others with the sharp edge of ridicule. The teacher's lips tightened. "Because that is not what history records. Answer the question properly." But Nora began. "No. But Nora." The chalk tapped against the board, sharp as a warning. "You're clever enough to know the rules. Stop trying to be difficult." Heat flooded Nora's cheeks. She whispered the date, her voice so soft it barely reached the front of the room. The teacher nodded briskly, satisfied, and moved on as if nothing had happened. But for Nora, the moment hung in the air like smoke that refused to clear. At recess, one boy whispered just loud enough for others to hear, "Why do you always have to say weird stuff?" Laughter snickered through the crowd like dry leaves catching fire. Nora folded her arms across her chest, staring at the ground, wishing she could sink into it. That night, she returned to the Black River. The figure in green was waiting, as though he had watched the day unfold. Nora's voice trembled with bitterness. "They don't want my questions, they want obedience." The figure's reply was steady, unyielding. Authority often mistakes silence for respect and truth for rebellion. But hear this, the truth you carry is not a weapon, unless wielded without compassion. Learn when to speak, learn when to hold. The time will come when your words must pierce like arrows, but not yet. Nora's chest ached with both relief and frustration. She wanted so badly to be understood. And in that moment, at least, she was not alone. But she knew. Sooner or later, the arrows inside her would demand release. After the scolding in class, Nora tried harder than ever to silence herself. She copied dates and names neatly into her notebook, repeated answers with a calm voice, and laughed when everyone else laughed, even when she didn't find the joke funny. And on the surface, it worked. Her teacher began to nod at her with approval, as if Nora had finally learned her place. Her classmates stopped calling her strange. At home, her mother even remarked, "See, you're becoming like the other children. I knew you'd grow out of your odd ideas." But Nora didn't feel like she was growing out of anything. She felt like she was folding herself smaller and smaller, pressing her mind into corners until it ached. Every question she buried was like a bird inside her chest, wings beating wildly against the bars of a cage. One afternoon, as she walked home, she saw something that made her stop cold. On the roadside lay a small bird, still and lifeless. Its wings were spread wide, feathers dulled with dust, as though it had fallen mid-flight. Children passed without a glance, but Nora crouched beside it, her heart twisting. "Why does everything that breathes have to stop one day?" she whispered. The wind stirred the feathers, but carried no answer. That night, she tried to force herself into sleep, tried to shut down the restless noise of her own mind. But the questions rose anyway, sharper, louder. Why do people lie? Why do we celebrate wars? Why does truth frighten those who claim they want it? And then the dream returned. The Black River rippled restlessly, no longer calm but moving with hidden currents. The figure in green approached slowly, his robes swaying like reeds alive with wind. "You try to bury the questions," he said, his voice both kind and unyielding. "But they are seeds, not stones. Seeds do not die in silence. They grow in the dark." Nora's chest tightened. "But I don't want to be different. I just want to be normal." The figure tilted his hooded head, and for the first time she glimpsed a faint curve of a mouth, almost smiling. "Normal is a word for sleepwalkers. You were not born to sleep." His voice softened, though beneath it lay steel. "You cannot unask what your soul has asked. You cannot close eyes that have already opened. The questions are yours, Nora. They will shape your path, no matter how tightly you try to bind them." She woke with tears soaking her pillow, and the image of the dead bird seared into her mind, its wings open, waiting for flight it would never take. And deep down, Nora knew pretending would only ever break her. It happened on a gray, rainy week. The classroom windows rattled against the wind and the smell of wet coats and muddy shoes clung to the air. Nora had been quiet all day, doing what she always did, copying notes neatly, keeping her head low, trying to blend into the background. But at lunch, she made a mistake. The children gathered around a crowded table, trading dreams of the future. A doctor, a singer, a famous athlete. The room buzzed with excitement, with laughter and light. When the question turned to Nora, she hesitated. Her hands tightened on the edge of her lunch tray. Finally, she spoke. I want to understand why people pretend. Maybe I could help them stop pretending." For a moment, the table fell utterly silent, and then the laughter came. Quick, sharp, merciless. "Help them stop pretending," one boy sneered. "What are you, some kind of magician?" Another girl leaned forward with a cruel smirk, more like a ghost. "Always talking about creepy stuff." Nora's cheeks burned hot. She tried to explain, voice shaking. "I just mean, people smile when they're sad. They say they're fine when they're not. I notice it, don't you notice it too?" But her words only fueled the laughter. Louder now, meaner. Nora the noticer. Someone jeered. "She sees everything, even Marin, once her closest friend," giggled along with the others. She didn't look at Nora, couldn't meet her eyes, and that betrayal cut deeper than all the mocking voices combined. Nora pressed her lips tight, swallowing the sting in her throat. She lowered her head, pretending to be busy with her sandwich, though every burst of laughter felt like a stone pressing against her ribs. When she finally escaped outside, she fled to the farthest edge of the playground. She pressed her forehead against the rough bark of an old tree, the drizzle cold against her skin. "Why am I always wrong for saying what's true?" she whispered into the gray air. That night she returned once more to the Black River. But this time the water churned violently, silver foam breaking the surface. The storm howled, yet the cloaked figure stood tall and unshaken, his green robe whipping like a banner in the wind. "They laughed at me," Nora confessed, her voice cracking. "They laugh because they fear," he replied, his voice carrying over the roar of the river. "Mockery is a mask sharper than any blade, it hides trembling hearts." "But it hurts," Nora said. "I feel like they cut me open." The figure raised one hand, and instantly the storm quieted. His voice deepened, steady as stone. "Child of sight, even Osiris was torn apart by his brother. His pieces scattered, yet truth endured. Remember this. The world may try to break you into fragments, but what is broken can be gathered, and what is buried can rise." Nora felt his words anchored deep inside her, heavier than stone, brighter than fire. And yet, even as she woke, the echo of laughter clung to her chest like an old scar that refused to fade. After the day of laughter, something in Nora shifted. She didn't fight to be heard anymore. She didn't try to explain herself. She simply pulled back. At recess, while other children shouted and chased each other, she wandered the edges of the playground where the grass grew tall. At lunch, she chose a quiet corner, sometimes pretending to read, sometimes truly reading, but always apart. Books became her shield. In the school library, she discovered volumes no one else touched, myths carved from forgotten times. Stories of gods who ruled and died and rose again. She traced the names: Osiris, Isis, Horus, Set. She didn't understand them fully, not yet, but the rhythm of those tales echoed the same river that visited her dreams. They felt familiar, like voices she had always known. At home, she filled notebook after notebook with drawings, scales balancing feathers against hearts, rivers coiling like serpents beneath starry skies, cloaked figures standing between worlds. Her mother frowned. "Why don't you draw flowers, Nora, or smiling faces like other girls?" Nora only shrugged. "These are what I see." Her father tried once more to guide her back. "You're too serious, Nora. Childhood is for play, not heavy thoughts." But Nora knew better. Childhood had never felt light to her. It had always been filled with questions, and questions carried weight. At night, when the house was quiet, she lit a small lamp by her bed. She whispered into the glow as if it might answer. "If no one wants to hear me, then maybe the light does. Maybe the river does." And the river did. That night, she found herself not on the shore, but on a boat gliding across the black water. The cloaked figure stood at the stern, staff in hand, guiding it forward. His voice carried over the still surface. You are learning solitude. It burns, but it protects. Many fear solitude because they mistake it for loneliness. But solitude is the flame that keeps your inner truth alive when the world tries to extinguish it. Nora touched her chest where the ache always lived. Then why does it hurt so much? Because you are still learning to carry it, he said. In time, the flame will not scorch you. It will warm you. Until then, endure. When Nora woke, she sat in the darkness of her room, the faint glow of the lamp still alive beside her. And for the first time, the silence did not feel empty. It felt alive. As if somewhere across the centuries someone was keeping vigil with her. The laughter of her classmates still stung. The disapproval of her parents still weighed heavy. But deep in her chest she felt it. The thing that made her different was also the very thing that would one day make her strong. And so, at 10 years old, Nora stepped quietly into the first chapter of her destiny. Already walking the banks of a river most would never see.